بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, and may peace and blessings be upon the Messenger, the Islam. So today, inshallah, is going to be about the early Islam. So many different things to cover in this topic, and it's a very, very big unit. It's actually disproportionately big compared to the other units in this lecture series. So what I will do, inshallah, is I'll discuss a big part of it today, and then I'll record something later on and add it to the YouTube video if you guys want to see it later on, inshallah. So the first thing I want to cover right now is the first converts of Islam, the very, very first convert when the message came out. Does anybody know who the first number one person was who converted to Islam? It's Khadija. Now, the thing is, there can be an argument made for her that she was the first convert to Islam because she believed the Prophet before she even knew what happened to him. Before she knew what happened to him in the cave and all this, she didn't fully comprehend it, but she instantly believed him because she knew him very well and she was already they were married and all that. Now, the thing what happened is, there's also a couple other people who around the same time accepted Islam. The second person, well, there's some ikhtilaf, but the second person we will mainly say is Waraqah ibn Nawfal, who was this person, they still did not utter the Shahada. So Waraqah ibn Nawfal never uttered the Shahada, even said the Shahada, yet they were still the second person to convert to Islam. And of course, some scholars differ over the third person. Some say it was Abu Bakr Siddiq. Some of them say it's Ali ibn Abi Talib. Some say it was Zayd ibn Harith. Of course, now regardless of this can be settled by saying Abu Bakr was the first free man to accept Islam. Ali was the first child to accept Islam. And Zayd was the first freed slave to accept Islam. So we already have a few people. This is like episode 1. This is the very, very beginning of Islam. We already have a handful of converts very quickly. Of course, we already know Abu Bakr. We know the background of him. And we've discussed in previous lectures Zayd ibn Haritha. And we've also discussed, I believe, Sakin Khadija. Now, when it comes to Abu Bakr, we know that the Ummah of Islam were unanimous in knowing that he has a very, very high rank in Islam. Even the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah has chosen me as a Khalil, close friend, so I am not allowed to have a Khalil, to choose a Khalil. But if I were allowed, I would choose Abu Bakr. Even one time, Abu Bakr and Umar had an argument, and the Prophet ﷺ, he went to Umar and said to him, when Allah sent me with the truth, all of you accused me of being a liar, and it was only Abu Bakr who believed me. So won't you leave my companion alone? So he came to the defense of Abu Bakr. That's how high of a status Abu Bakr had through the Prophet ﷺ. This is why, of course, we know that he's very close to him in all this, because he had a very, very high status to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, of course, there's another occasion where he said, ﷺ, there was not a single man whom I invited to Islam, except that he had some doubts before converting, except for Abu Bakr. So, of course, if anybody tries to convert to a religion, say you're not Muslim, say you're not a Muslim and someone tries to convert you to another religion, you're going to have some doubts, naturally. Abu Bakr, he did not even have any doubts. He instantly believed it. He knew Sayyidina Muhammad, he was an honest man, without any doubts. He had no doubt whatsoever, did not have any hesitation. He accepted Islam. And of course, it even says, as soon as he presented Islam to him, he did not hesitate before accepting, and he was even directly referenced in the Quran Kareem. In the Quran, it says, it does not matter if you do not support him, for Allah did in fact support him when the disbelievers drove him out of Mecca. And he was only one of two. And this is a reference of the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr. They were both aware. In the Quran, what is it mentioning? Does anybody know where they were? They were both in the cave. And it's mentioned in the Quran. And they were hiding in there, moments away from being captured and killed. And very, very close. However, what happened is in the verse, while they were both in the cave, he reassured his companion, do not worry, for Allah is certainly with us. And Allah, he refers to Abu Bakr as what in this ayah? Companion. He calls Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ, his companion. So this is already a phrase in the Quran Kareem. It is not an explicit reference, of course. We already covered before that the only companion that was explicitly mentioned in the Quran was Zayd ibn Haritha. But we don't have an implicit reference. We have a reference of Abu Bakr in the Quran where he says that he is a companion of Muhammad ﷺ. After this, of course, there are other batches of converts. Okay, we have the next batch of converts that accepted Islam. They accepted it to the hand of Abu Bakr, which kind of reinforced his status in Islam. He was able to convert many people to Islam, or at least be present in that kind of role. He had a very integral role as a helper of the Prophet ﷺ. And of course, there are other converts. There was Sa'd ibn Waqqas, Abi Waqqas. There was Uthman ibn Affan. There was Zubair ibn al-Awwam. And there was Abdurrahman ibn Auf. Now, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was the youngest, and he was 13 years of age when he converted to Islam. So his faith was so strong that he remained steadfast. And what happened to him is very crazy. So I know you guys know about India and Gandhi and the hunger strike that he did, which is really political. We learned about it in class in high school and all that stuff. So he did a hunger strike to kind of put political pressure on the British. Now, what this convert did, he was 16 years old and converted to Islam. What his mother did, she did a hunger strike to make him leave Islam. Imagine, like we even covered this before, that in like the role of your parents, how important your mother is and your father is. And this is even like she's not even Muslim, right? What happened is she gave him very, 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 very severe emotional blackmail. She would starve herself, lead a hunger strike like Gandhi, but this is for her own son to leave Islam. She would not eat, she would not drink until he renounced his faith and went back to idol worshiping. And of course, she was like, okay, khalas, like I'll let my health deteriorate, I will wither away, all that, because I want you to leave Islam and go back to worshiping idols. And of course, what happened is he finally said, oh mother, I will never renounce Islam. Even if you had 1,000 lives, I would never let you lose them. I would let you lose them one after the other before renouncing my faith. So see how strong, it's a 16-year-old, by the way. Like, I can think of myself as like not that strong of a person compared to him. He's 16 years old and he's telling his own mother, like, if you die, life after life, you have 1,000 lives, I will still never leave Islam. And this is his own, like the person who raised him. And of course, what happened after this, Allah revealed in the Quran al-Kareem in response to this event. But if they pressure you to associate with me, what you have no knowledge of, do not obey them, but keep their company in this world courteously, and follow the way of those who turn to me in devotion. And of course, when she realized that her attempts were futile and he was not going to leave Islam because of this hunger strike in this business, of course she went back and she started eating again, and he did not let it be a problem. And like alhamdulillah, he was able to stay a Muslim and all that. That was one of the first converts in the first batch of converts. Another convert, Uthman ibn Affan, he was one of the first, the Prophet's closest friends. The Prophet ﷺ said, even the angels are shy in his presence. That's how close of a friend he is to the Prophet ﷺ. The angels are shy in his presence. And he was actually later on, you already know probably, he was the third Khalifa in Islam, right? He's the third Khalifa. So we already know, this is already another convert. We know his status in Islam. If we had more time, we'd discuss it. He has many stories and many, many things. There are TV shows about him and stuff. We don't have time to cover that. So I'll mention other converts before moving on. We have Zubair ibn Awwam. He was a direct cousin of the Prophet, and his mother was Safiya bint Abdul Muttalib. Now the Prophet once said, every Prophet has his disciples, and my disciple is Zubair ibn al-Awwam. And then, of course, look how these people all have high statuses. One of them, the angel tried his presence. He was the third Khalifa. One of them, he converted. He would not let his mother's hunger strike stop him. This person right here, we're saying that he was a disciple of the Prophet ﷺ. Very, very high statuses of the first converts of Islam. We also have Abdurrahman ibn Auf, who was one of the oldest of these four converts. He was actually the number one oldest out of the four people who converted here. And actually, what he did, he was actually a businessman. So when he emigrated to Medina, he left all of his possessions behind and had very little money. Actually, he had no money, no belongings, all that. But he has very little things with him. And one of the Ansar in Medina famously said, this is very famous, probably heard it before in a khutbah or something, I have 2 wives and 2 gardens. I will divorce 1 wife for you and give you 1 garden. Now Abdurrahman ibn Auf said, what? May Allah bless you, just direct me towards the marketplace. And of course, in no time, he became a very successful businessman. Even he starting over in a new city, Allah blessed him with a lot of wealth and success in his business endeavors. And of course, not just that, he served the Prophet ﷺ in every way he could. So, like we said, I just wanted to cover these converts at the very beginning. They were very successful and they were giants in terms of establishing Islam in the early era. The next to convert was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. He was the first prominent figure from a noble class to convert. He was not a slave, but he was a servant. He was a shepherd, and he was a very, very big enemy of Islam. And as we learn more about the Seerah, we'll know that many, many enemies of Islam end up flipping and converting. And the story of this one is actually very beautiful, actually. So what happened is, the Prophet ﷺ, he was traveling with Abu Bakr, and they passed by a farm, and they said to him, his name is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, they said to him, "Oh young man, we are thirsty. Can you give us some milk?" And Ibn Mas'ud, he was honest. He was not like a dishonest guy. Maybe he was an enemy of Islam, maybe he was this, that. He was not dishonest. So he honestly said, look, I cannot give, because it is not mine to give. So he's working at this farm as a shepherd, and the Prophet ﷺ comes to him asking him for milk. He said, "Look, I'll be honest with you. Like I cannot give because it's not my farm. I'm just working here." Of course, the Prophet ﷺ went. He said, "Look, just tell us where we can find a goat that is not giving milk anymore." So he points him towards a goat that is not giving milk anymore. He goes to this goat. Of course, Allah provided, and he was able to get milk from the goat. And the udder filled until it was full, and the two of them drank. And of course, Ibn Mas'ud said, "Who are you talking to?" Because the Prophet was asking Allah for help. Who are you talking to? And he introduced himself as a prophet. So then after that, Ibn Mas'ud, he did what? Converted to Islam on the spot. And he was the sixth person to convert to Islam. All of these people have very, very big stories and very big like lore, like a lot of information about them. But these are just like a little highlight of the first 6 people who converted to Islam. And of course, actually, it was known in this time. And the Prophet even said about Ibn Mas'ud, he said, "Whoever would like to know how to recite the Quran properly as it was originally revealed should read according to the recitation of Ibn Umar, which was Ibn Mas'ud, him." So he even said once that he learned over 70 surahs directly from the Prophet's mouth. So this person, he was very close to the Prophet. He learned Quran from the Prophet. This is just the 6th convert. Okay, we can go all day talking about converts, but I just wanted to stop at this one. And now we're going to talk about the next batch of converts. It was a slave, comprised the slave class of Mecca. Now there's many of them. I have a lot of information about them. I'm not going to read all of it. But what we know is, at some point, the Prophet ﷺ, he wrote to the Byzantine emperor, Heraclius. And the emperor, he quizzed Abu Sufyan, the Prophet's enemy. And one of the questions was, who are his followers? Aren't they rich? Are they rich and powerful, or are they weak and downtrodden? And Abu Sufyan said the latter was true, right? They're weak and they're downtrodden. Like, they're not rich. They're not the most powerful caste. They're not at the very, very, very top. And what happened? He said, Heraclius or something. He's the Byzantine emperor, not Muslim or anything like that. He says this is a sign of a true faith. This is the sign of a true faith, that the first people who accept are the weak and the downtrodden. Because the rich and powerful have more to lose. They're more attached to the dunya, all this. The poor people have less to lose, but they're more down to earth and they care more about spirituality and what happens in the afterlife and all that. So as that, you have a Byzantine emperor already said, look, this is a true faith. And he's not even Muslim, he's not whatever. He just says it from a bird's eye. Of course, he was not the first non-Meccan to convert. The first non-Meccan to convert to Islam was Amr ibn Abasa, which was a Yemeni Arab. His story is beautiful, and it's a little bit long. I'll try to make it a little bit short. Essentially, what he was is he came from Mecca to Medina, he came from Yemen to Mecca to meet the Prophet, and he found that the Prophet, he was not public yet about the prophethood. He talked with the Prophet. He said, "What are you?" The Prophet said, "I'm a messenger." Amr said, "Can I join you?" And then the Prophet said no, because the dawah was too weak, and you have no protection. It would put him in danger to join Islam. So the Prophet said, "Return home, and when the news reaches you that I am victorious, come back." So then, of course, the Prophet, 15 years later, when the Muslims entered Medina, Amr came back and reunited with the Prophet. So this was the first non-Meccan to join Islam. So these are just a little introduction to the early converts of Islam. Now we're going to talk about something that's very important, and you'll see it very important even in America today. All around the world today is the dawah, right? We have different stages of dawah that come. Like Islam did not just start taking over instantly like this as a world's fastest growing religion. There are different stages to dawah that were taken before it became what it is today. So we're going to start this. I don't want to talk about everything, but I will briefly go over the first stages. The first stage was private dawah. So it was in private. He talked to his wife, he talked to Abu Bakr, he talked to close people to him. It was more private, right? And then 3 years after that, the second stage was public dawah with no military combat. So there's 2 types of public dawah, one with military, one without military. The second stage was without military combat, where the Muslims, they were persecuted, but they did not retaliate. So they would be persecuted for believing in Islam and all this stuff, but they would not fight back, they would not make problems, they would just let it be. And it was very difficult, a test of faith for those Muslims involved. But they were boycotted, they were tortured, they were persecuted. They had to endure it all for 10 years. It intensified until it was boiling point. And then the Muslims migrated to Abyssinia, which is a whole story. And the details will be explained for that in the next week lecture, inshallah. The third stage of the dawah of this time was the public dawah with selective military combat, where basically the Muslims would fight the Quraysh, but they would not fight anyone else, only the Quraysh, because it was limited to their persecution, their their conflict with them, that's who they limited the military combat with. They were very, very selective. And then after that, what happened? Then there was open dawah. So now they started opening the dawah to everyone. But in this case, what they had to do is what? They had to be self-defensive, right? They could not just do open dawah because it was very dangerous to be a Muslim at this time. They have to be more self-defense. So they have to, if there's political power, for example, they did not use it for dawah. They did not use the resources they had. They had a lot of different resources and stuff. They did not use it all. And there's even a treaty, fighting. Even though the Prophet had an army, a political power, he had resources. The Muslims were very disheartened at this time, but they did not use it because even Allah said, "Indeed, we have granted you a clear triumph." Right? We see at this stage lots of success from dawah, even though they did not use all of their resources of political power. And then there was the final stage of dawah, which is the fifth and final stage, which is dawah with full military combat to anybody who opposes Islam. So for this, this is the stage in which the Prophet he passed away. But the caliphs after them, they continued the stage where they would conquer the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, and then the Umayyad the dynasty sustained it. And then they conquered the lands of Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan. That's why we have Afghan Muslims, Uzbek Muslims, all these places. And then even all the way to China, we had Muslims. And at the very end, they went back to the fourth stage. So during the Abbasid dynasty, the Muslims went back to the fourth stage where global dawah took place without military conquest, which is the stage that we are in still right now. So we're not really using military conquest to expand Islam. So these are the 5 stages of dawah. Of course, there's many. I could have spent an hour talking about this, but I don't want to take too long. Now we're going to move to the declaration of prophethood. So when did the Prophet ﷺ declare that he's a prophet? Because there's a point where he declared to everyone, "I am a prophet." So basically what happened is 3 years after the initial revelation of Iqra, when the Sayyidina Jibreel came to him, Sayyidina Jibreel went to him and said, "Iqra, read." Allah revealed some verses to him. And actually, he told him to preach them publicly. 3 years after this, he told him, I'm going to make sure I'm saying it correctly. He revealed these verses to the Prophet ﷺ to preach publicly. 2 of them were especially pivotal in taking the message public. The first one was Surah Al-Hijr, where it says, "So proclaim what you have been commanded and turn away from the polytheists." The other explicit verse is in Surah Al-Shara, where it says, "And warn your closest relatives." So the Prophet ﷺ was told by Allah to make sure to warn your closest relatives. And there's a wisdom to this, even like not talking about the Quran now and so now, just there's a wisdom to starting from within. In many lectures that you can be here where it tells you we have a problem when you're pissed off with society or something is bothering you in your school or whatever. Any problem you have to start from within. You start fixing yourself, then you maybe go to your family, then you go to your community, then your city, then your state, then your country, then your planet. And that's something that basically he did this, right? He started with the people closest to him. That's what Allah revealed to him. He said, "And warn your closest relatives." And of course, this was also extended to all of the Quraysh, and particularly with the ones who are the most close to him. So first, the Prophet ﷺ, keep saying ﷺ, he went to his immediate prime, which was Banu Hashim, and that had his immediate uncles and aunts. So what he did is he had about 40 of his relatives and tribesmen to come, and then he prepared some food for them. Now, it was like very good food. They all ate until they're full. And then Abu Lahab, who already had heard rumors that the Prophet was converting and all this stuff, or he was Muslim and all this, he excused himself. He was like, he had a feeling that the Prophet would make an announcement like this. So, he said he strategically excused himself. He's like, "I have some business I have to take care of." So he left. And then some other people left. So then the Prophet went back another day, made another gathering. But this time he made the announcement before anyone could leave. He made the announcement that he is a prophet. The way he did it is he stood up by praising Allah, and he gave the khutbah al-hajj, which is something that we usually say in the Friday prayer. It's Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu, nasta'inuhu, nastaghfiruh, na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina. And then min sayyiati a'malina. It's a long thing. Essentially, what he said is, in translation, all praise is due to Allah. I praise Him and seek His help. I believe in Him and rely upon Him alone. I testify that there is no God but Allah alone without any partners. And he said this in a time when nobody was Muslim. These guys were idol worshippers. He stood up and said this. Then he continued and said, "O Banu Abdul Muttalib, I do not know of any Arab before me who has come to his people with a message that is better than that which I am coming to you with." And then he started to preach his prophethood. And it was the first time the prophethood was publicly announced in the manner. And Abu Lahab, he got very irritated and he stood up and he marked to those around him. He's like, "Oh, Banu Abdul Muttalib, by Allah, this call is reprehensible. So obstruct him before others do so. And if you don't, you'll either accept Islam, which will be your disgrace, or you will later oppose him and be killed." Of course, the other relatives, his 40 his relatives, they were not as harsh as him, but they did not take the message that seriously, right? So this is like a very big thing. Maybe at that time it didn't seem like it was very that pivotal. It was not maybe that big of an inflection point, but it really was. This is when he publicly preached his prophethood for the first time. Then what he did after this, he announced his prophethood to the entire city. So usually when you have an announcement or something at that time, you have an elaborate announcement. You can go up and make an announcement to the people. You go to the Kaaba or you go to something. The Prophet he climbed Mount Safa, which is now much smaller than it was. Right now, people climb it because it's eroded a lot. By the time it was very, very high, he went to Safa and he said, "O Sabah," which is something you say when you want to gather people's attention. Then he called out to each tribe, "O Banu Fihr, O Banu Adi, Banu Adi, Banu all the different tribes, right?" And so on. And people started to gather and come because the Prophet is making announcements. Very honest man that they see, who is a very great person. He has an announcement. You want to see what he wants to say. So they all gather up, and he says, he asked, "If I told you that horsemen were advancing to attack you in the valley on the other side of this mountain, would you believe me?" And then the people who all came, what did they say? They said, "Yes, of course. We have never known you to lie." Then the Prophet said, "Then know that I am a warner of an impending severe punishment." Then he then called them to Islam, to the worship of Allah alone. And he continued to call them. He started from the furthest tribe from him, working inwards. "Oh, Banu Ka'b ibn Lu'ay, save yourselves from the fire of hell, for I will not be able to help you in the day of judgment." "Oh, Banu Murad ibn Ka'b, save yourself from the fire of the hell. Oh, Banu Abdul Manaf." All the different tribes, he keeps repeating this, making a large announcement, telling everyone that come to Islam. Basically, like, you have to save yourself from the fire of hell because I will not be able to save you from the fire of hell. And Abu Lahab, who he showed that he was displeased before, he stood up and he picked up some sand and threw it in the direction of the Prophet, his relative. He was disgusted at what the Prophet was saying. He said, "May your hands perish. Is this the reason you have gathered us here today?" Allah revealed the verses in response. "تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب ما أغنى عنه ماله وما كسب سيصلى نارا ذات لهب وامرأته حملة الحطب في جيدها حبل من مسد," which is, may the hands of, this is what Allah is saying in the Quran. He called Abu Lahab out, enemy of Islam. He, in the Quran, like we're all mentioning him today, says, "May the hands of Abu Lahab perish, and may he himself perish. Neither his wealth nor his worldly gains will benefit him. He will burn in a flaming fire, and so will his wife, the carrier of thorny kindling. Around her neck will be a rope of palm fire." Habalum min Masad. So this is a surah. It's in Juz Amma, and little kids, we have little 5-year-olds, mashallah, like reciting. Like, this is to Abu Lahab, the person who threw sand at the Prophet. Of course, Abu Lahab, he would indeed go on to display the most animosity and cruelty to the Prophet. And we can talk about family relations and how you're supposed to be good to your family and stuff. We can see what Abu Lahab did, and we can see what Allah is going to do with him. He got called out in the Quran, so this is already like game over for him. Of course, when the Prophet was calling out different tribes on this announcement, he did it in order from closeness to him, which is like very striking because it shows that each person is responsible first and foremost to their immediate family members. And when he was calling out the tribes to Islam, to the announcement, he started in from the tribes closest to him, and then he worked out. And this is, like I said earlier, you start from within, right? You have a problem, you have something, even in life in general, you have a problem with maybe the country. You start within, deal with yourself first, then your community, then your city, then your so on. Okay, and this is what he did. He started out with the tribe closest to him, then worked himself out after. Now we're going to talk about Dar al-Arqam briefly. So of course the members, they started to grow a little bit. It was over a dozen at this point. So they have over 12 believers, and they needed a place to congregate. They did not have a masjid to pray in. They do not have like that they can pray in without compromising their safety. So the Prophet chose the house of Al-Asad ibn Abd al-Uzza, which was more famously known as Al-Arqam ibn Abi al-Arqam. He was one of the first 10 people to accept Islam, but he was from a different clan, which is Banu Makhzum, not Banu Hashim. So it was less suspicious when people were going in and out of this place. He was not one of the main people in the Prophet's tribe. Also, it was in the center of Mecca. It was very busy, so people can go in and out of this to worship very easily without much suspicion. So, see, there's also, okay, so we have to discuss some opposition from Quraysh that we had at this time. So at this time, people of Mecca did not only have one ruler. They basically had different tribes. Each tribe had a representative, and they basically had like a council where they would all congregate, and each leader had a seat on the senior council. The leader of Banu Hashim was Abu Talib. Okay, and the Quraysh tried to appeal with him. They tried to bribe him. They tried to convince him. They tried to threaten him to basically give up Sayyidina Muhammad. They wanted him. He didn't let it happen, and at some point they made an ultimatum with him. They basically said either stop the Prophet from preaching or hand him over to us. He said this to Abu Talib. Now Abu Talib is not like Abu Lahab. He loves the Prophet. He's a very, very, very beautiful person. He's not like him. So he went to the Prophet and told him this ultimatum. He said, oh my nephew, my people have approached me and told me such and such. So be merciful to yourself and be merciful to me. Do not place me in a situation that I cannot bear. Now the Prophet, what did he say? Did he give up Islam? Of course we know he did. He said, oh my uncle, by Allah, if they were to give me the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand, my left, I could not give up this message until I succeed or I am martyred. So we have different narration of this, but basically when Abu Talib saw that the Prophet was very persistent in this, he said, do as you wish, my nephew, for by Allah, I will never approach you again asking you to stop. And indeed, he fulfilled his promise until he died. Even he was made fun of, he was ridiculed, boycotted, expelled for basically standing up for his nephew. And he was not even Muslim. And Abu Talib had this kind of like this attachment, this like dedication, is the word I'm looking for. Loyalty. He was very loyal. He was not even Muslim. This is subhanallah. And Quraysh, they went and gathered and they approached him another time, and all of them, not just Banu Hashim, and they proposed an offer. They said, look, we have our most noble young man in Mecca, and their offer is to exchange one son for the other if you adopt him for exchange for a nephew. Abu Talib even said, he's like, he lived with this proposition. He said, what an evil bargain. You want me to fatten up your son in exchange for you to kill mine? And then, basically everyone gave up on him. Even the last person who was neutral, he came and said, your people have done all they can and exhausted all their means. You must choose an option. And this is like the last person to be neutral in the Quraysh. He didn't listen. He kept it going. He said, look, he was still very, very brave, very, very loyal to the Prophet. And he did not flinch, did not change his mind or anything. So this is very unprecedented. They even wanted to overthrow him, but that was the only way they could get what they wanted. And it was nothing that happened before, right? This never happened before. Because Abu Talib was still standing firm in his brave support, even though he could have gotten overthrown and killed and all these things. He's very strong. He's very sincere. He saved the Prophet, and of course, the Prophet actually did not. He did not love anyone more than he loved Abu Talib, because he was like his father, he was like his mother, and he was like raising and supporting him, nurturing him his whole life. He was beloved to the Prophet and to the companions as well, not just to the Prophet. That years later, when the Abu Bakr, his father, was accepting Islam near the end of his life, Abu Bakr cried and said to the Prophet, "O Messenger of Allah, how I wish that this hand was the hand of your uncle Abu Talib, rather than the hand of my own father." So even the companions wanted Abu Talib to convert to Islam, even more than their own father. Abu Bakr, at least, he wanted, even more than his own father, he wanted Abu Talib to convert to Islam. Of course, we know what happened. Allah knows best. He did not convert to Islam. He died non-Muslim, even though the Prophet had many desperate pleas to convert him. But of course, Allah's wisdom is the most supreme, because if Abu Talib did convert, he would have been deposed as chieftain of his tribe, and the dawah would have been crushed, and it just shows that the Prophet has limits, and Allah knows best, of course. And it gives an example, even if you're dawah tabling or doing IW or something, and you're giving dawah to somebody and they're not budging. Look, if Allah does not want somebody to be guided, they're not going to be guided. We have the Prophet's own uncle who stood with him like this. He was not guided to Islam. But, of course, conversely, we have, if Allah wants somebody to be guided to Islam, they will be guided to Islam, and we know this, of course. So now we're going to wrap up very soon, inshallah, by talking about the tensions rising in Mecca. So they tried to ban the recitation of the Quran in Mecca, right? They tried to physically stop it. They tried to drown it with abuse and profanity. And even whenever the Prophet ﷺ would raise his voice to recite the Quran in front of the Kaaba, they would curse Allah and His Messenger. And the Prophet would try to raise his voice to overcome their insults, but Allah revealed do not recite your prayers too loudly, nor silently, but seek a way between. So even Allah is saying, like, he's instilling the methodology of, like, you focus on your own mission without focusing too much or being distracted on by the actions of other people. Even your enemies will try to make it difficult for you. So it's actually a beautiful story here. I'm going to skip a little bit just to go to the story. So before I do that, I'm going to mention that we have Ibn Mas'ud. He went to the Kaaba at the peak time of gathering, and as the court of the companions, he had a very beautiful voice, and he wanted to recite something. So they needed somebody to recite something because the Prophet, he kept getting hatred. He kept doing it. It was not easy for him to do it all the time. And then Ibn Mas'ud, he wanted to do it. I volunteered to do to recite the Quran over there at the Kaaba. And everyone was saying, like, all the Sahaba saying, no, don't do it. You don't have a tribe. You don't have a tribe. Usually in Mecca at this time, actually, like, if you had a tribe, they would protect you. So if I wanted to go do something that was kind of risky, maybe for the sake of Islam, my tribe has my back. It's kind of like games, like they have your back. And Ibn Mas'ud, he did not have a tribe, and he wanted to recite to the Kaaba just for the reward of it. He volunteered and said, I put my trust in Allah. And they're all like, they're going to beat you up. They're going to do this to you. You don't have protection. You don't have a tribe that will protect you and do all this. He didn't care. He said, I put my trust in Allah. So then he went to the Kaaba, and then he recited Surah Ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahman, علم القرآن, خلق الإنسان وعلمه البيان, الشمس والقمر بالحسبان, والنجم والشجر يسجدان. We know the rest. It's a very long surah. But he recited this. He could not even get the 2 pages of this before being overpowered, basically. Not even 2 pages of Ar-Rahman. And by the way, people started to gather when they heard, because it's very beautiful. His style of Quranic recitation was very beautiful. It was unique to the Quraysh. It was not like poetry, but it was equally fascinating and captivating. And then when they realized when he was reciting this Quran, yeah, they pounced on him. They beat him up. He could not even finish 2 pages of the surah. SubhanAllah. Ar-Rahman is not that long of a surah, by the way. It's only like 2 pages. But you could not even get the 2 pages without them beating him up. And then basically the companions went like, this is exactly what we were worried about. We were worried that they would beat you up. And he still said, by Allah, nothing has changed today except that my contempt for the Quraysh has only increased, and I am willing to do the same tomorrow. So he's getting beaten up. He's saying Surah Ar-Rahman. Surah Ar-Rahman was one of the most beautiful surahs. He gets beaten up for it before even finishing it. And he's saying, look, I'll do it again. I'll come back tomorrow. I don't care. My faith has only like it's not changed at all. Like I said, I'm gonna skip something, but basically what I'm skipping is we have some people who are the enemies of Islam. Basically, they snuck out at night and they would listen to the Quran when it was being recited from the Prophet. And they heard him reciting at night. They would sneak out and they even caught each other. 3 different of them, they came in the middle of the night and they saw each other like what are you doing here? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? And they all like made excuses like yeah. And then at the end, it's like they like it. Like they're out there fascinated. They've never heard anything like it before. And I'm telling you, it's very beautiful because it's, if you're at 3 in the morning and you hear like some hip hop song or you hear some rubbish like that, and you're not gonna like walk outside at 3 in the morning and listen to it. It's like, that's wow, so beautiful. No, you're gonna go out to sleep. You like turn it off, close the window, whatever. But this is Quran. It's like you hear Quran like, especially at this time where something brand new and novel like this, it is that beautiful. Like they actually like they're against it, but they're still listening to it. So and then another tactic the Quraysh had is that they would even spread rumors about the Prophet, by the way. So they would do insults and mockery at the Prophet. They would say bad things about him, mock him. And there was a period of time that passed without the Prophet reciting, revealing revelation. So there's he was getting revealed. Sometimes he did not get revealed in Quran. And actually, we had a talk in the retreat last year where we talked about this and we talked about what happened. So there's a woman, basically, she was a Quraysh woman. She mocked. She said, "I see that your shaitan has abandoned you when the Prophet stopped getting revelation." So he stopped getting revelation from Allah, and like he's thinking, like, did I do something wrong? Like, why am I not getting any more Quran? And then this hits him hard when some woman says, a Qurayshi woman, "I see that your shaitan has abandoned you," saying this about stuff of Allah, right? It really hurt him very deeply. For then Allah revealed Surah Al-Duha. الضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى لم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. I just said it in Arabic because I'm going to say it in English now. By the morning sunlight, and the night when it falls still, your Lord has not abandoned you, nor has he become hateful of you. And the next life is certainly far better for you than this one. And surely your Lord will give so much to you that you will be pleased. Did he not find you as an orphan, then shelter you? Did he not find you unguided, then guide you? And did he not find you needy and suffice you? So do not suppress an orphan, or nor repulse the beggar, and proclaim the blessings of your Lord. So even like he's getting basically like treated terribly by his own people, and you know, even they made him think that like there's a reason why he's not getting revelation anymore. And SubhanAllah Rabbina reveals this surah, which we have actually a video on YouTube if you want to see on the MSA YouTube. We have a talk about this from the retreat last year, where it's about this surah specifically and the tafsir of this surah, and this kind of story is more in detail. Yeah. Anyways, what happened is, Abu Jahl would try to make the believers. He would say bad things. He would say, he would tell people the Prophet was crazy. He would basically spread bad things, basically. And it was actually a beautiful story I want to mention before we end the lecture. I'd like to find it real quick. It's about yes, okay. So Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab, remember Abu Lahab, right? Abu Lahab is the one that's called out in the Quran that only people who talk about him are people who are saying bad things about him. No one says anything good about this guy. He and Abu Jahl, they would stand on the outskirts of Mecca and they would warn travelers that the Prophet was a magician. Oh, people, be careful. Do not be mesmerized into turning away from the gods of your forefathers. These tactics, ironically, they led to some people converting to Islam, by the way. It brings their attention to it. But there's one man who was a leader of a Yemeni tribe. He literally put cotton in his ears until he eventually questioned his actions as an intelligent man, because he heard that he's a magician and all this. He wanted to block it out like this. But he was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm a doctor. So the Prophet, if he is a crazy man, I'm a doctor. I can cure him. I can fix this. So he goes and finds him. He approaches him and says, I heard you are a madman, and I am here to cure you. The Prophet, he replied, I'm not a madman, but listen to my message. And he began with the khutbah al-hajjah, which is alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu nasta'in, wa nastaghfiruh, what we say at the beginning of the khutbah. And before the Prophet could even start reciting Quran, you don't even get the Quran, you have to just say khutbah al-hajjah, like this beautiful stuff. Before the Quran, the man said, stop, repeat what you just said. The Prophet repeated it again. Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu nasta'in, wa nastaghfiruh. And then he said, what are you? By Allah, I have never heard anything more beautiful than this. What are you? The Prophet, he declared himself as a prophet, and then this man accepted Islam just from that. So he was told that avoid this person, he's crazy. He tried to cure him. He finds out this person is not crazy. He's on the message. He's spreading the message, and what he's saying is this is from Allah. And of course, people, they also call him a poet. The Prophet could not read or write, but they call him a poet. And Allah revealed that you could not read, and you could not write even before this revelation, nor could you write at all. Otherwise, the people of falsehood would have been suspicious. So there's a wisdom in Allah making the Prophet illiterate. But if he wasn't, people would have been more suspicious. So this is most of the lecture of early Islam. And then there's going to be like another 10 pages of like this book, basically. So I'm going to try to record that, inshallah, later and append it to the video, or maybe make it separate upload for it, inshallah. But yeah, anything I said that is wrong is from the shaitan. Anything that is correct is from Allah. جزاك الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.